Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're steering away, maybe, from the usual headline lawsuit drama. Instead, we're looking under the hood at the technical tools being built to fight fraud deep inside court records. We've got a fascinating set of sources describing a new data countermeasure.
That's right. Our focus today is this thing called the HybnerBoost signal. We're going to dig into where it came from, how it actually works, and, crucially, where it might fall short on a global scale. And this is interesting because it signals a real shift, moving away from just people manually reading endless legal documents, arguing back and forth, which is exhausting, towards something more proactive, using data science to shine a light on court dockets, which can be incredibly opaque.
Okay, let's jump right in then. The sources describe a very specific kind of threat. They call it a TTP, Tactics, Techniques, and Procedures. What we're talking about here is basically weaponizing legal jargon, using misleading document titles filed directly in court records. It's a kind of procedural trickery.
It really is. It's a deliberate manipulation. It works by exploiting complexity and maybe even trust in the system. The whole idea is to use language in the title that sounds perfectly normal, procedurally correct, but it actively lies about what's in the document. This is meant to confuse people, obviously say litigants, folks without lawyers who get swamped by rules, but also, and this is key, sometimes to trick the courts themselves, get them to make quick decisions or dismiss things based just on that false title summary.
And the way this solution, the HybnerBoost signal, came about is, well, almost fitting. It was developed directly because of the actions of one specific attorney whose patterns basically illuminated the problem. So they named the signal after her, sort of honoring the inadvertent insight.
Yeah, it's a classic case of seeing your opponent's move and then coding it, turning their signature tactic into something predictable, something a machine can spot. And that's the real power here, you see. Before, if a lawyer pulled something like this, what could you do? You had to spot it first, which takes time, then draft a motion, argue it, hope the judge reads carefully enough to see the difference between the title and the text. It's slow, expensive. Now, with something like HybnerBoost, there's a way to potentially flag this kind of fraud automatically. At scale. It's about using code to bring accountability where, let's face it, human review and the system's own inertia sometimes fail.
Okay, let's get down to the nuts and bolts of this deception. What's the repeatable pattern? What allowed engineers to actually turn this tactic into code?
Well, the core pattern is pretty clear-cut. The TTP happens when, quote, the title of the document is deceptive and does not reflect what the document says. That's the definition. And the sources are clear. The goal is almost always about gaining some kind of procedural edge, usually speed or avoiding scrutiny. If you can make a clerk or even a judge glancing at the docket think something has already happened, like an order being signed just based on the title, you can skip vital review steps.
And it sounds like this wasn't just a one-off theoretical thing. They saw it happening repeatedly.
Oh, yeah. Very brazenly, apparently. The signal was developed after they saw 2 occurrences of the exact same trick within just 11 days. Same law firm, same case. That kind of repetition, it basically creates a digital fingerprint.
A gift for data scientists, as you said, even if the situation itself is pretty grim.
Tragic, yeah. The first big example, the one that really sparked this, involved targeting an appellate court. High-stakes stuff. An attorney filed a document titled, get this, Notice of Entry-Temporary Orders.
Okay, wait. If I'm a clerk at the appeals court or the opposing lawyer checking the online docket, Notice of Entry-Temporary Orders means one thing to me. It means those orders are done, signed, sealed, delivered. The judge acted.
Exactly what it implies. And the source material alleges this was done specifically to mislead the First Appellate Court of Texas. Because at that exact moment, the other party had a request pending before that court, a petition for a writ of mandamus, basically asking the higher court to compel the lower court judge to sign those very same orders.
So by filing a document, that sounds like the orders are already signed.
Bingo. The law firm effectively tells the appellate court, hey, problem solved down here, no need for you to intervene.
Right. The thing you're being asked to force. It already happened.
Precisely. And the appellate court, likely just looking at the docket title, operating under the assumption it's accurate, would see that writ of mandamus is moot. Pointless. The relief requested getting the order signed appeared to have already happened, and that's apparently exactly what happened. The appellate court denied the petition as moot. So the opposing party was blocked from getting help from the higher court, all because of a deliberately misleading title.
That's a huge amount of procedural power packed into just a few words on a screen. But the sources indicate this wasn't just some clever trick pulled late in the game. It was baked in from the start.
Seems like it. It was part of the strategy early on. There's documentation referenced as Index 5 in the case file. It shows the attorney, Morgan Hibner, was, quote, already committing fraud with the titles near the beginning. This specific early document, Index 5, was titled as if it were a temporary restraining order. But critically, it wasn't the actual signed judicial order needed to legally restrain someone.
Okay, and the timing around this Index 5 filing is important too, right? This wasn't just about procedural gamesmanship.
This is where it gets, frankly, quite chilling. That first dodgy document, Index 5, it was filed very, very shortly after the plaintiff in the case had reported someone to the IRS, like right around March 22nd. That closeness in time. It strongly suggests the procedural fraud might have been direct retaliation.
So the argument laid out in the sources is these misleading titles had maybe two goals. One, the tactical court advantage we just discussed, but two, something darker, more systemic.
Yes. The inference drawn is that these deceptive titles were designed, quote, from the very beginning to call me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. If you file documents that falsely suggest orders exist or actions have been taken, how does the other side react? They get confused. They might not comply with orders they don't know about or that aren't real. They file things trying to clarify the record. And the firm could then point to all that the confusion, the filings, the supposed noncompliance as proof that the opposing party is mentally unstable, unreliable, volatile. It's manufacturing a record.
That definitely moves things beyond a typical civil disagreement.
Way beyond. If that inference is correct, that these misleading filings, this whole fabricated narrative, was a direct response to punish or discredit someone for blowing the whistle to the IRS, then we're potentially talking about federal crimes. The sources explicitly mention things like tampering with a witness or silencing a whistleblower.
Let's pause on that. Witness tampering. How does filing a dodgy court document fit that description?
Well, witness tampering isn't just physical threats, right? It's interfering with someone providing truthful info to federal authorities. So if you deliberately create a misleading court record, intending to use that record later to paint the whistleblower as unstable or untrustworthy in, say, an IRS investigation or related lawsuit, that is interference. You're trying to destroy their credibility as a witness because they reported something. It turns procedural fraud into a calculated act of retaliation. So this HybnerBoost signal, it's not just catching sloppy paperwork, it's potentially picking up the digital scent of serious criminal activity.
All right, let's shift gears from the crime to the countermeasure.
Okay.
The HybnerBoost signal, what's really striking is how practical it seems. The source says this potentially powerful tool took maybe 20 minutes to code. How does such a focused analysis work where human review might fail?
It works because it's not trying to understand the legal argument, it's looking at structural consistency, or inconsistency, rather. The signal's main job is simple. It just boosts the score flags. Essentially, any document in the data pipeline that shows this specific fraudulent pattern they codified. It cleverly exploits how legal documents are typically written, at least in English.
Okay, walk us through the technical steps. This involves natural language understanding, NLU, right?
Yeah.
Teaching machines to grasp meaning.
Exactly. So, step 1, title topicality analysis. The system runs standard NLU techniques, entity recognition, to find key terms, topicality analysis to see what the main subject is. But, and this is the trick, it only looks at the document's title. Take the example, temporary restraining order and order settings hearing for temporary orders. The NLU spots order, restraining order hearing, but the title really emphasizes temporary restraining order. So the topicality score for order might be super high, like 0.9 out of 1. The machine concludes, okay, this document is overwhelmingly about an order.
So the machine reads the label on the box, essentially, takes it at face value.
Precisely. Then comes step 2, body topicality analysis. Now, it does the exact same NLU analysis, finds entities, scores topics, but it only looks at the first, say, 4 or 5 paragraphs of the actual document text. This limitation, just looking at the beginning, is the absolute key, and it leans heavily on cultural writing norms.
Why just the first 2 paragraphs? What's the thinking there?
It comes down to what the sources call an 80-20 rule in the English legal corpus. In legal systems based on common law, like the US, UK, Canada, writing is generally expected to be pretty direct. Linear, get to the point quickly. The title and the very beginning, maybe the first 5% of the text should give you like 80% of the core meaning. You state your purpose up front. If a document is an order, the first paragraph usually starts with something like, it is hereby ordered that.
Right.
Makes sense. So if the title yells, I'm in order, the first few lines of text should immediately start ordering things. Exactly. But what happens in these fraudulent documents, the body does something else entirely. The first few paragraphs might just talk about scheduling or procedural history, or maybe the judge's reasoning before an order. So the NLU analysis of those first few paragraphs might find that the topic hearing scores really high, maybe 0.7 or 0.8, while order scores way down, like 0.2.
Okay, so title says order, body starts talking about hearing, which brings us to step 3.
Step 3, the disconnect flag. This is where HybnerBoost lights up. The signal triggers of the gap between the main topic score from the title, or order, 0.9, and the main topic score from the body's intro, REGI, hearing, 0.8, is bigger than a certain threshold. It's basically quantifying the mismatch between the advertising, the title, and the product, the actual content. The signal flags this structural disconnect. It sees a statistical anomaly that a human reader focused on comprehension might not consciously register until they're pages deep into the document.
That's quite elegant, really, using the expected structure against the manipulation. But you mentioned some higher-level tech concepts earlier, query rewrite, knowledge graph teams. How do they fit into this seemingly simple check?
Right. That's a nod to the underlying tech. For listeners who are maybe deeper into data science, it connects the dots. But the analogy works for everyone. Think about search engines, like Google. They have teams working on query rewrite. When you type Jaguar, are you looking for the car, the animal, the football team? NLU figures out your likely intent. And knowledge graph teams, they build massive maps of how facts connect. They know Apple, the company, relates to iPhone, and Tim Cook.
Okay, got it. Understanding relationships and intent.
Exactly. HybnerBoost applies similar NLU ideas, but to legal docs. Instead of figuring out what a user means to search for, it's figuring out what a document pretends to be about. It's using techniques designed for accuracy mapping knowledge, clarifying intent to spot deliberate inaccuracy, deliberate misrepresentation. It shows how these data science fields overlap, that 20-minute coding job. It was only possible because it built on years of foundational NLU work done by those kinds of advanced teams.
Okay, so they built the signal. Did it actually work in practice? Did it catch anything new?
Yes, immediately. The sources say the prototype flagged a fresh instance of this exact TTP, like right away, almost as soon as it was turned on, basically. Confirmed the pattern was still active.
What was the example?
Another document titled Temporary Restraining Order, but the NLU analysis showed the actual focus right at the beginning was just an order-setting hearing for temporary orders. Different things entirely. And crucially, that misleading title, Temporary Restraining Order, was put exactly in the docket, right there in the public summary.
Which brings us back to this idea of docket obfuscation. Why is getting that false title into the official public summary so important tactically?
Because the docket is the official record, the summary everyone relies on. Court clerks use it. Opposing lawyers check it constantly. A judge reviewing a case file later might scan it first to get the gist. So by planting that false title, Temporary Restraining Order, right into the public docket, they are, quote, fabricating a narrative. They're building an official-looking record that strongly suggests a certain legal action happened, even if the document itself says otherwise, or critically, even if the actual order was never signed by the judge.
And this false narrative suggesting things happened that didn't can then be used later to claim the other side messed up somehow.
Precisely. The other party is stuck. They're chasing ghosts, filing motions to clarify, wait, does this order actually exist? Trying to prove a negative. All that takes time, costs money, makes them look potentially difficult or confused, which might feed right back into that fabricated instability narrative we talked about earlier.
But the story gets even stranger, doesn't it? The sources detail something truly bizarre, a missing document index number. This seems to go beyond just misleading titles.
Yeah, this is maybe the most aggressive tactic described, really quite shocking. In the sequence of documents filed in the case docket, the numbering jumps straight from index 6 to index 8. Index 7 is just gone, vanished. A gap like that in a sequential numbering system, that's a massive red flag in any kind of record keeping.
Yeah, as someone who looks at data pipelines, a skipped sequence number is usually a sign something seriously wrong. What's the analysis here? Why would index 7 be missing?
Well, the analysis points to a couple of possibilities. One, maybe less likely, is they just skipped it to intentionally mess up the sequence, create confusion. But the more probable and far more alarming scenario presented is that Index 7 is the actual signed judicial order, the real deal. An order that the attorney, Morgan Hybner, managed to get the judge to sign, but then deliberately didn't file publicly, never put it on the docket, never formally served it on the opposing party.
Hold on. You're saying the lawyer might have a valid, signed court order in their possession, but kept it secret from the other side and the public record. Why on earth do that?
It creates what the sources call a concealed legal weapon. Think about it. The attorney could literally have an enforceable court order in her pocket, completely unknown to the person it affects, and invisible on the public docket. This is described as a tremendous violation of the process. You can't comply with an order you don't know exists. You weren't served.
So what's the strategic advantage of having this secret signed order? How could it be used?
Oh, it's tedious, multi-layered. First, the other side can't appeal it or ask the judge to reconsider it, right? The clock for appeals never even starts because they were never notified. Second, and this is the ambush part, the attorney could potentially hold on to Index 7 for months, then suddenly file it and claim the opposing party has been violating a court order all this time, demand sanctions for contempt of court.
Wow, that would completely flip the script. Create instant legal jeopardy for the other person based on an order they never knew about. And it would certainly bolster any narrative about them being uncooperative or defiant.
Absolutely. It allows the attorney to spring a trap later, enforce rights the other party thought they still had, create total chaos. So discovering this missing Index 7, which likely only happened because of the kind of detailed data analysis that also led to HybnerBoost, uncovers a potential layer of fraud far beyond just misleading titles. It's about strategically concealing judicial action itself.
Okay, so HybnerBoost seems like a pretty smart defense, at least within the U.S. legal system context where it was developed. But the source material takes a sharp turn here, raising what they call a chilling idea about its limits globally.
Yeah, this is the big caveat. The chilling part is realizing that HybnerBoost's effectiveness is almost entirely dependent on the way legal documents are typically written in English. If this TTP is being used by a network that is, quote, operating globally, well, they can just shift tactics, move their angle of attack to legal systems in countries where the signal simply doesn't work.
And it doesn't work because that core assumption that the title's topic should match the first few paragraph topic isn't universal, is it?
Exactly right. This gets into cultural writing differences, which is fascinating. In the English legal world, especially coming from common law traditions, the norm is directness. That 80-20 rule we talked about. State your business up front. This linear structure makes the title-body disconnect a really good flag for potential manipulation.
So HybnerBoost penalizes documents that sort of bury the lead, topic-wise. Why would other legal systems structure things differently?
Look at the Spanish legal corpus, for example, or practices mentioned from places like Venezuela. In many legal traditions, particularly those based on civil law, the style is often different. They might prioritize laying out extensive context history, citing laws and precedents first, before getting to the main point or the actual order. It's about building a complete foundation.
Right, it's a different philosophy. Establish all the background and justification before you state the core decision or action.
Precisely. The source gives this interesting analogy of a birth certificate from some regions. The actual child's name and details might not even appear until the second page. The first page might be entirely dedicated to the parent's full details, lineage, the legal basis for the certificate, jurisdictional statements, etc. Now imagine running HybnerBoost on a complex legal filing from Venezuela. The title might correctly state the final judgment, but the first 5 paragraphs could be entirely about establishing jurisdiction, recounting case history. The NLU would see a massive topical disconnect between the title, judgment, and the intro, jurisdiction history.
And the signal would then incorrectly flag tons of perfectly legitimate documents as fraudulent, just because their structure follows a different cultural norm.
That's the vulnerability, exactly.
Ugh.
So if a bad actor realizes their title fraud trick is getting caught by HybnerBoost in the US or Canada or the UK, they just shift operations. They start using the same TTT in, say, a Spanish-speaking country's courts or somewhere else where legal documents are structured differently. Their cost of committing the fraud stays low, but our automated defense suddenly becomes useless noise. It makes the signal a potent local tool, but potentially a very fragile global one.
Okay, so if we can't just magically change how legal documents have been written for centuries in different cultures, how do you scale this kind of detection? How do you protect against this TPP everywhere?
The path forward, according to the sources, really lies in collaboration, high-level international data sharing, and leveraging existing expertise. Specifically, they point to the advanced NLU and query understanding frameworks already built by major global tech companies. Think Google and others who operate worldwide.
Why are their frameworks the key?
Because these companies have already solved this exact localization problem for their own global products, like search engines or information services. Their NLU models are built from the ground up to, quote, account for these differences in writing systems of different cultures. They already know how information is typically structured in Japanese versus German versus Arabic versus English. Their systems are trained on those differences.
Ah, so the idea isn't to reinvent the wheel and build 100 different HybnerBoost variations for 100 legal systems. It's more like take the core logic of HybnerBoost, the concept of checking for a title body topic disconnect, but run that logic using these pre-existing globally aware NLU models.
Exactly. You plug the HybnerBoost concept into a system that already understands cultural writing nuances. You internationalize the signal that way. Otherwise, we're just playing catch-up forever. The fraudsters just move to the jurisdiction where the tech is weakest or where the cultural blind spots exist. It means tackling this requires tech cooperation that actually crosses borders, just like the problem does.
So this deep dive really highlights the surprising power you can get from just, 20 minutes of smart coding. Creating this HybnerBoost signal, a potentially scalable tool against a really insidious kind of legal fraud. It's a direct technological answer to weaponized complexity.
And the implications are pretty significant, especially when you remember the alleged timing that this fraud kicked off right after a major IRS whistleblower report. It makes those deceptively titled documents potential dynamite, legally speaking, quote, powerful ammunition. If the signal helps confirm that the structural manipulation was designed to silence or discredit that whistleblower, then the procedural fraud itself becomes evidence. Evidence of potential witness tampering, a federal crime.
What HybnerBoost really seems to do is shift the balance. It takes the immense burden off the victim who'd otherwise face years and huge costs fighting this document by document and puts it onto an automated system. A system that pragmatically looks for the known signature of this specific manipulation.
Which leaves us with maybe a final provocative thought for you, the listener. Solving this kind of calculated, systemic lawfare seems to require a partnership.
Yeah.
You absolutely need human moral fiber, right? The ethics to see the injustice, the drive to fight it. Machines don't have that. But ethics and drive alone, they can't keep up with the speed and scale of a global, tech-savvy network deliberately exploiting complexity. So maybe justice in this modern era isn't just about having good lawyers with strong morals. Maybe it also demands applying pragmatic, smart technology to counter these scaled procedural attacks. The future of justice might depend just as much on smart algorithms as it does on righteous advocates.